Back in 2018, Southwest Airlines had to apologize after a flight attendant mocked a confused 5-year-old girl named Absidy during the boarding process. The attendant had even posted a photo of the child's boarding pass online. Interestingly, most of the public backlash that I saw was not against the airline, but against the mother for naming her child a name that is spelled using the first 5 letters of the alphabet. Let me just quickly rant about people with NPC names that make fun of people who have unusual names. If your mother went to the trouble of carrying you for 9 months and undergoing the pain of labor and delivery, and then just phoned it in with a name like Jason or Allison, I don't think that's a flex. That's the opposite of a flex. I can't imagine what it must feel like to know that when your mother held you for the first time and looked into your eyes, she thought to herself, you know how this baby makes me feel? When I see my infant child, I feel a sudden and urgent need to blast my free will into the sun. There is nothing about this child that inspires or merits even a shred of creativity or uniqueness. A Kroger brand name will do for this one. All in all, having a Kroger brand name or giving a Kroger brand name to your child doesn't impress me. Rant over. Now, don't get me wrong, I also hate the name Absidy, but not because it's unique. I hate it because I hate the alphabet. I invite you to imagine a world where there's no alphabet. It's easy if you try. Civilization did great without an alphabet for a very long time, and many languages continue blissfully to this day without an alphabet. To be clear, I do not hate graphemes, nor do I hate graphemes that represent phonemes. I hate the alphabet as a system of organization. In the Anglosphere, from the encyclopedia to a stack of resumes to the participants in a Zoom meeting, things are organized alphabetically and often for no good reason. How did this happen? Well, humans have been writing for about 3,000 years, but alphabetical order didn't really appear until the 12th or 13th centuries, according to historian Judith Flanders. In her book, A Place for Everything, she explains that for much of the Dark Ages, systems of organization just weren't needed. A monastery library might only have 100 books. Books themselves might be organized in hierarchy, in the order of God's creation. First God, then the angels, then man, and so on. Books could also be organized by geography, such as the Doomsday Book of 1086, and early dictionaries were organized by etymology. Never forget what they took from you. I would like to point out that China had some of the first reference books and had highly categorized systems to organize and categorize information. Okay, thank you. But in the Anglosphere, the alphabet slowly came to dominate. It wasn't wholeheartedly accepted, though. Even as late as 1803, Samuel Taylor Coleridge outlined his, shall we say, objections to the alphabet, and he objected strongly to the Encyclopedia Britannica. So, what's the problem with using the alphabet as a system of organization? Well, we're using it as a system of organization even when it doesn't really make sense to do so, and when better systems of organization exist. Even in the digital age in which alphabetical organization is increasingly anachronistic, alphabeticity remains. We cling to alphabetical order on the screen, on the page, and in our minds, and this clouds our judgment and our fairness. Imagine, for example, you're in HR. You've got a stack of 100 resumes. You start at the top, discarding some candidates, calling others. Ultimately, you're trying to fill 2 positions. Chances are you're going to fill those positions before you even make it to the bottom of the stack. So for the people at the bottom of the stack, they're out of luck. If a physical or digital stack of applications for a job, a scholarship, school admission is alphabetized, and they often are, Those at the bottom have virtually no chance. So who is at the bottom? Statistically, it's disproportionately Asian Americans, although they are not the only demographic group that is affected by alphabeticity. A 2010 study in the Economics of Education Review concluded that the earlier in the alphabet your name is, the more likely you are to be admitted to a competitive school, probably because of applications being sorted alphabetically. Another study from Public Opinion Quarterly found that name order has the effect of always advantaging candidates listed first by about 2.5%. That's a margin that could win an election, and many ballots are ordered alphabetically. Putting authors in order on an article is now a necessity for the vast majority of scientific papers. And in the last decades, there's been a sharp rise in the number of multi-authored publications. Now, about 90% of all scientific publications have more than one author. Researchers in a number of disciplines, but most notably economics, can pour blood, sweat, and tears into their work and then find their names cut off where their research is published or cited if names are alphabetized. When this kind of citation cuts off certain researchers and puts others first, the loss in prestige and recognition can harm their future career. A 2006 Stanford Caltech study found that faculty members with earlier surname initials are significantly more likely to receive tenure at top 10 economics departments. Law school faculty with surname initials closer to the beginning of the alphabet are more likely to receive invitations to visit other institutions. Two researchers at the University of Colorado at Boulder even reiterated concerns that patients might lose out on limited availability treatments because they are alphabetically too far down the list. In a great article in the LA Times, a Korean American investor wrote that scrolling through Zoom's participants tab, I subconsciously remember only the participants with A and B names, failing to ever make it down the list. He points out that inevitably in a big meeting or a big class, some participants will get more attention and recognition and be better remembered, and others will become invisible. A great study in SM Computer Science found that when a digital interface shows first names in alphabetical order, which is a common practice on several pages and screens, each page and screen may have imbalances in respect to gender. Listing people alphabetically by first name, for example, in a website directory, as we often see, can therefore create an advantage for one of the genders. Let's look at an example of how a better design is more equitable. On Probably.com, students can choose from over 5,000 Spanish teachers, but students are most likely to pick a teacher on the first page. In an alphabetically sorted design, teachers like Manuel M. and Julia R. would have no chance. But this website rotates teachers randomly, giving preferences to those with better ratings. And students can also apply a list of filters to create a personal shortlist. In the case of physical resumes or applications, simply shuffling the stack to randomize it should be common practice. But even if we fix the interfaces and the paper stacks, alphabeticity remains. Where? In our minds. A lifetime of seeing things in alphabetical order leads us to subconsciously prefer things that place earlier in the alphabetical order. For example, there is a study that shows that investors prefer stocks that appear earlier in the alphabet, regardless of any other factors, though this bias seems more concentrated among individual investors. Due to internalized alphabeticity, teachers prefer pupils with high alphabetical order names. So, for example, teachers are more likely to call on Ada than they are to call on Zilla. If your name is at the end of the alphabet, you're less likely to be identified by teachers as an outstanding student. That probability of being designated outstanding dropping 10% for a 10-letter gap. In short, internalized alphabeticity can lead even well-intentioned people to prefer and thus promote those with earlier in the alphabet names. But alphabeticity doesn't just affect how we feel about others based on their names. It also affects how we feel about ourselves. Alphabeticity can be internalized by the Zacks and the Yulias. For example, a 2007 survey found that readers with end of the alphabet surnames rate themselves as significantly less successful. Anxiety, internalized anxiety about being left out, means that those with end of the alphabet surnames are more likely to make impulse purchases, says a study on the last name effect in the Journal of Consumer Research. If you're like me, you're probably wondering, why do we keep doing this to ourselves? 3 reasons. The alphabet is perceived as being impartial, even though it's clearly not. Alphabeticity increases when we're overloaded with information, as we often are in this day and age. And it's easy or lazy. Alphabeticity is an anachronistic cowpath from a pre-digital age that should never have been paved. But now it's an 8-lane highway on the page and in our minds. So what can we do about this menace? Let's look at some suggestions from the experts. Jeffrey Zacks has advice for students with late in the alphabet names. Get noticed, he says. Find some other way to distinguish yourself. For teachers, it's as easy as calling roll in reverse alphabetical order, or putting names in a hat to choose who to call on during classroom instruction. It's possible that even being aware of name biasing will reduce it. The last thing that I'd like to talk about in this video is how good research is often reported on badly. Researchers do great research, but when their work gets disseminated to the general public, as it rarely does, it's a ham-fisted, clickbaity abomination like science proves the alphabet is racist. This provocative coverage creates reactionary feedback loops that undermine the usefulness of even the soundest findings. So once again, why do we keep doing this to ourselves? As is often the case, we keep making bad decisions because the information we would need to make better decisions isn't reaching us in an effective way. If you'd like to know more about names and how the names we have affect our lives, consider clicking onto this channel. Thanks for watching.